A verdict and a guilty plea. The world watched as two high-profile cases, the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial and the Idaho quadruple murder case, captivated millions. Joining us to discuss, criminal defense attorney Steve Greenberg. A lot to talk about. Let's start with the Sean Diddy Combs verdict. Does the outcome mean that the defense, in your opinion, adequately argue the interactions laid out in this trial were consensual?
Well, they obviously must have. You know, the prosecution had a lot of problems because there was a great volume of text messages in this case showing that things were consensual. There were a lot of text messages with Cassie and with Jane showing that they were willing participants in what came to be called these freak-offs. In fact, Cassie was oftentimes arranging things on her own. I think the government overreached a little bit on this case. They got into a relationship and they're trying to take federal criminal statutes and they're saying that we're going to criminalize a person's relationship. I was critical of this prosecution all along. Look, are there toxic relationships that we want to criticize? Yes. Is P. Diddy a bad guy? Yes. Is domestic violence bad? Yes. But should we make it a federal criminal case and say, you should go to jail for 15 years for a relationship that was largely consensual, although there are parts of it that we find disgusting? Probably not. I think that's what the jurors said.
And as we've talked about before, from the very beginning, the defense laid out they were honest about his client and talked about the domestic violence. So I wonder that impact that had on the jury. And looking at sentencing, will the fact that Diddy didn't profit from the prostitution make a difference?
I don't think that makes a difference, but the federal sentencing guidelines, they're very interesting. You know, they're a point system, and the government, as we saw yesterday when he tried to get out on bond, and the defense have very different views. So the judge is going to have to add up the points, and the prosecution wants the judge to still penalize him for the things that he was acquitted on, and they want the judge to penalize him for the violence. Now, the judge said yesterday, your lawyers admitted you're a violent man, so I'm not going to let you out on bond on this case. It'll be interesting to see if he takes that into account when he sentences him. The sentencing guidelines, according to the defense, come in somewhere around 18 months to 2 years. Typically, a first-time offender gets sentenced under the sentencing guidelines, so Diddy would get out right away. The government thinks that he should get around 4 or 5 years. Then he won't get out right away, and they want consecutive time. That's never going to happen.
Remains to be seen, but it is something that we're watching. I want to ask you, before I let you go, about the quadruple murder case in Idaho. Bryan Kohberger received 4 consecutive life sentences. Is this a win for the prosecution?
Look, if 4 people died, it's not a win for anybody. I mean, I think the win here is that the families aren't going to have to sit through a trial and hear the horrific details. As much as we heard some of the families wanted to see him get the death penalty, I think that at the end of the day, they're going to realize that sitting through a trial and hearing about what happened to their loved ones would not have been a pleasant experience, and that they're better off with this. And I have always been of the belief that spending the rest of your life in prison is far worse than the death penalty.
Families will be able to give victim impact statements. We understand Kohberger will be sentenced later this month. I'm sure we'll check in with you before then. Criminal defense attorney Steve Greenberg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a safe holiday.